Back now to our top story this evening. President Emmanuel Macron has beaten far-right challenger Marine Le Pen, as we said, in the French presidential runoff. This is more than analysis of voting data by pollsters Ipsos and Sopra Steria. We're hearing that as that data comes in, it certainly is being confirmed, and that's why the flood of congratulations to Macron. So far, Macron is expected to take the win by 58.2% of the vote to Le Pen's 4.8%. As we take you live now to our correspondent Ross Cullen, who is in the French capital of Paris. So we understand, as we're seeing from the visuals there, Emmanuel Macron on his way to make his victory speech at the Eiffel Tower. Tell us a little bit more about the mood where you are.
Yeah, that's exactly. You can see the Eiffel Tower behind me. That iconic part of Paris has been chosen by Emmanuel Macron to celebrate his election victory, becoming the first French president in 20 years to be re-elected. Not since 2002 has a sitting French leader won re-election. That's exactly what Emmanuel Macron has done. Today, he succeeded in beating his nationalist rival Marine Le Pen. They first met in 2017 in the French presidential runoff 5 years ago, when Macron scored a landslide victory over Le Pen. This time, much closer. She managed to get more than 40% of the vote, so more than 40% of French voters choosing to support a candidate from the extreme right, but 58% there or thereabouts supporting Emmanuel Macron in this decisive second round vote, meaning he is going to be the next president of France for the next 5 years. We are going to have that success of centrist, pro-Europe, liberal policies, a mix of right-wing and left-wing that Emmanuel Macron says is the right mix for France's future, beating the other offering, which was Marine Le Pen's nationalism and populism, scoring 40%, but not enough to win. Emmanuel Macron is the next president of France.
More centrist right as a result of the challenges that he's faced. No doubt this election has been somewhat of an uphill battle compared to the much easier win that he had in 2017. So surely lessons to be learned. What are the expectations, do you think, from that victory speech, and is it going to reflect some of this?
Well, he says that what is going to come in the next 5 years, if he were to be elected, and now he has been elected, so we can maybe expect some of those policies, much greener, more focus on the climate emergency. He wants his next prime minister to be appointed with a special green focus. Two deputy prime ministers, one looking at future energy, one looking at the protection of biodiversity and the reduction of pollution. So a real green focus. He wants France to be the first big country to go fossil fuel free. He also wants to restructure France's pension system. This is something that he attempted to do in his first term in office. Unsuccessfully, we saw massive protests against his attempts to raise the pension age to 65. He shelved that proposal, but now he's won re-election. He says it goes back on the table, trying to get that restructuring of the pension system through Parliament. And Parliament is interesting because in June there will be the legislative elections for MPs here in France. If he gets a majority of MPs, it will be much easier for him to pass his legislative proposals in the lower house. There are more than 570 MPs. They're all up for election in June. He does at the moment have a majority in Parliament, so the past 5 years have been pretty easy for him to be able to get his legislative programme approved by his party and associated allied parties. But the opposition, people like Marine Le Pen, she said tonight she's now focused on those next elections, trying to unseat President Macron's majority, making it hard for him to pass legislation. So the attention for the opposition, including Jean-Luc Mélenchon on the far left, he's already said he's now focused on the next elections. But for Emmanuel Macron, he will be taking in this moment, soaking up his success at the age of 44, already having won 2 French presidential elections.
And no doubt an inspiration to many who have presidential aspirations. Ross, tell me this, the mood on the ground, what are the pollsters saying, particularly from the surveys that they've been conducting, as we've seen Europe go more to the right in terms of the voting pattern, nationalist agendas that are being driven because of the difficult conditions that people are facing. We know that the French were driven largely by those issues, unemployment, and, as you mentioned, COVID-19 has also brought on its own difficulties. But I'm just wondering, do you think they were swayed somewhat? We've seen Marine Le Pen soften her delivery of those hard, should I say, what have been seen as die-hard messages for those right nationalists, and it seems she had some appeal, but what convinced the French generally that this was not the way to go, given the issue around migration, which has raised the ire by some? I'm just trying to get a sense of how much more behind Emmanuel Macron are there and his policies. There's some realism, but there's also the reality externally that you are going to have a problem of migration as people try to find a better future.
Well, what's interesting is that there is a large section of the population who didn't want Emmanuel Macron and didn't want Marine Le Pen, neither of them, to be president. We are expecting an abstention rate of more than 25% of people choosing to stay at home. And in fact, in the first round, the top reason why people didn't vote in the first round was they weren't available. It's also the school holidays, meaning that the abstention rate is pretty high. So Emmanuel Macron will have a challenge on his hands to unite a divided nation. More than 40% of people choosing a candidate from the extreme right. She has improved upon her score in 2017, improved upon her father's score when he ran in 2002. So each election, there are more and more people voting for the populist right message that Marine Le Pen and previously her father have been campaigning on. That's an issue that Emmanuel Macron will want to reach out to those people who did feel that Marine Le Pen's message was the message they most aspired to believe in, the message that resonated with them most, particularly on issues like the cost of living crisis. Marine Le Pen campaigning relentlessly, even since last year, on that her economic programme was better than Emmanuel Macron's. Her programme was focused around listening and understanding the concerns of ordinary people in the communities across France, whereas she painted Emmanuel Macron as a man much happier in and amongst the Parisian elite, remaining in Paris, speaking to international diplomats, attending international forums, multilateral institutions, and not that interested in village life in France and the real concerns of the French people. He will now have to prove to people who didn't vote for him that he is indeed a man who can listen to the concerns of ordinary people.
So, Ross, just before we spoke to you, we were speaking to economist Dr. Azar Jamin about the global economic outlook, particularly for developing nations. European leaders have been much encouraged by Macron's win, but we know that the war in the Ukraine with Russia has had varying impacts on Europe itself. Germany, Italy are said to feel the pinch much more, Russia itself. What about France? Do you think Europe is going to be, united around the way forward, particularly the French?
Well, it certainly is a message that the European Union is pleased to see, this continuity of power. They already know Emmanuel Macron's policies. They already know the kind of dialogue that he's been engaged in, and that will continue. They were worried about the message that could be conveyed by Marine Le Pen, the European Union, and this nationalist message. She's been pro-Putin in the past. She has accepted a low...
D'entre nous a fait le choix de me faire confiance pour présider notre République durant les 5 années à venir. Alors je veux remercier l'ensemble des militants, des volontaires, des compagnons de route et élus qui, depuis le début, m'accompagnent et ont rendu cette élection possible. Je sais que vous n'avez pas ménagé vos efforts, avez donné tant d'énergie, partagé tant de convictions. C'est en frappant au cœur que vient la vérité. Merci. Et je sais ce que je vous dois. Merci. Je veux remercier l'ensemble des Françaises et des Français qui, au premier, puis au deuxième tour, m'ont accordé leur confiance afin de faire advenir notre projet pour une France plus indépendante, une Europe plus forte, et par des investissements et des changements profonds, continuer d'assurer des progrès concrets pour chacun, en libérant la créativité, l'innovation dans notre pays, et pour faire de la France une grande nation écologique. Je sais aussi que nombre de nos compatriotes ont voté ce jour pour moi, non pour soutenir les idées que je porte, mais pour faire barrage à celles de l'extrême droite. Et je veux ici les remercier et leur dire que j'ai conscience que ce vote m'oblige pour les années à venir. Je suis dépositaire de leur sens du devoir, de leur attachement à la République et du respect des différences qui se sont exprimées ces dernières semaines. Je pense aussi à tous nos compatriotes qui se sont abstenus. Leur silence a signifié un refus de choisir, auquel nous nous devrons aussi de répondre. Je pense enfin à ceux qui ont voté pour Madame Le Pen, dont je sais la déception ce soir. Non, ne sifflez personne. Depuis le début, je vous ai demandé de ne jamais siffler. Parce que, dès à présent, je ne suis plus le candidat d'un camp, mais le président de toutes et tous. Et je sais que pour nombre de nos compatriotes qui ont choisi aujourd'hui l'extrême droite, la colère et les désaccords qui les ont conduits à voter pour ce projet doivent aussi trouver une réponse. Ce sera ma responsabilité et celle de ceux qui m'entourent. Car le vote de ce jour nous impose de considérer toutes les difficultés des vies vécues et de répondre avec efficacité aux colères qui se sont exprimées. Mes chers compatriotes, mes chers amis, aujourd'hui, vous avez fait le choix d'un projet humaniste, ambitieux pour l'indépendance de notre pays, pour notre Europe, un projet républicain dans ses valeurs, un projet social et écologique, un projet fondé sur le travail et la création, un projet de libération de nos forces académiques, culturelles, entrepreneuriales. Ce projet je veux le porter avec force pour les années qui viennent, en étant dépositaire aussi des divisions qui se sont exprimées et des différences, et en veillant chaque jour au respect de chacun, et en continuant d'œuvrer à une société plus juste et à l'égalité entre les femmes et les hommes. Alors pour cela, il nous faudra être exigeants et ambitieux. Nous avons tant à faire. Et la guerre en Ukraine est là pour nous rappeler que nous traversons des temps tragiques où la France se doit de porter sa voix, de montrer la clarté de ses choix et de bâtir sa force dans tous les domaines. Et nous le ferons. Et il nous faudra aussi, mes amis, être bienveillants et respectueux, car notre pays est pétri de tant de doutes, de tant de divisions. Alors il nous faudra être forts, mais nul ne sera laissé au bord du chemin. Alors il nous reviendra ensemble d'œuvrer à cette unité par laquelle seuls nous pourrons vivre plus heureux en France et relever les défis qui nous attendent. Les années à venir, à coup sûr, ne seront pas tranquilles. Mais elles seront historiques. Et ensemble, nous aurons à les écrire pour nos générations. Alors, mes chers compatriotes, c'est avec ambition et bienveillance pour notre pays, pour nous tous, que je veux pouvoir, à vos côtés, aborder les 5 années qui viennent. Cette ère nouvelle ne sera pas la continuité du quinquennat qui s'achève, mais l'invention collective d'une méthode refondée pour 5 années de mieux, au service de notre pays, de notre jeunesse. Chacun d'entre nous, il y aura une responsabilité. Chacun d'entre nous aura à s'y engager, car chacun d'entre nous compte plus que lui-même. C'est ce qui fait du peuple français cette force singulière que j'aime si profondément, si intensément, et que je suis si fier de servir à nouveau. Vive la République et vive la France!
As you see the re-elected French President Emmanuel Macron standing beside his wife. Perhaps let's just listen a little bit to some of the performance in celebration of his re-election, the first in 20 years for a French president.
Les jours de gloire est arrivé.
it's been considered a decisive victory there for Emmanuel Macron. Justin Trudeau, as you can see, the Canadian president there, saying congratulations, Emmanuel Macron, looking forward to continuing our work together on the issues that matter most to the people in Canada and France, from defending democracy to fighting climate change to creating good jobs and economic growth to the middle. And there are quite a few presidents from many countries who've sent in their congratulations. As you can see, one there from Zimbabwe's President Emerson Mnangagwa, saying congratulations to my good friend President Emmanuel Macron on your historic re-election. The future is bright for French-Zimbabwean relations. You've also had the Swedish Prime Minister say warmest congratulations to President Macron on tonight's election results. Let's continue our close cooperation bilaterally and for a competitive, green and resilient European Union. Here you've got Neshivran Barzani, the president there, of saying that I congratulate my friend Emmanuel Macron on his re-election as the president of France. I look forward to continue working closely with him to further develop our ties and solidify our efforts to promote regional peace and stability, the IKR president. And you've also had Pedro Sanchez sending in a congratulatory message from Spain, and this one from Michel Martin saying congratulations Emmanuel Macron on your re-election as president of France. Your principled and dynamic leadership is important. Many others who sent in their congratulations, and what is being said about this, as I said, it is historic, and there are those who are saying, as we still keep putting up those tweets, just to give you some thoughts around this re-election and how it's been seen. Le Monde saying, for instance, that Emmanuel Macron has been re-elected for the second time, the last 5-year term, and some of the takeaway from that saying that it's a triumph of many caveats, saying by French standards, a victory of over 55% of the vote is usually synonymous with a triumph. And remember, this is with a high abstention rate. I think it's almost 30%, but basically saying that Macron's win of the French presidential election makes him the new de facto European leader, and that his presidential election, a great deal of it is for the great battle for over Europe. You've seen some of those tweets from those other presidents or leaders of other countries, but kudos for Marine Le Pen, saying that even though she lost, some are saying that she has managed to do one fundamental thing, and that is the de-demonization of the right in France has been achieved, and that there's still a lot of work ahead for the French president, that he might not be able to do a lot in terms of domestic policies. He has spoken about the honeymoon phase being over, but it's time for him to draw in the majority in his vision that he promised at parliamentary elections, just in terms of things like education, health, etc. And of course he will continue to focus on the international policy that we've just spoken about. All that and more as we continue to unpack the results of that French presidential election. So the third round of Macron's fight for legitimacy at the top is what some are describing it as the third runoff, even though